At my daughter's wedding, she erased me from her speech and told 200 guests I was a failure who couldn't afford to save her dying mother. I sat at table 19 by the kitchen doors, watching Emily thank everyone except the man who raised her. She praised the Anderson family's wealth, mocked my old Honda Civic, and painted me as the broke father who disappointed everyone. But Emily didn't know about the phone in my pocket, or the promise I made to her mother 5 years ago. This is a true family betrayal story that will change how you think about inheritance forever. I'm Robert Whitaker, 68, a quiet retiree who everyone assumes lives on military pension. When I finally stood up and walked toward that microphone, the entire ballroom went silent. What my daughter was about to learn would destroy everything she believed about our family and the respected Andersons she married into. If you've ever been underestimated or betrayed by family, you need to hear what happened next. The Arizona Biltmore Ballroom glowed with soft amber light that reflected off the champagne bottles stacked in silver ice buckets. Waiters in crisp white shirts moved gracefully between tables, carrying plates of filet mignon and herb-roasted vegetables. I could hear the faint clink of silverware and the low hum of polite conversation. From the back of the room, I watched Emily move like a star across the stage, every gesture rehearsed, every pause, timed to draw laughter or applause. She had always been a natural performer. Even as a child, she knew how to charm a room. Tonight, she used that talent to pretend I did not exist. My seat assignment had been the first sign of what was coming. When I arrived earlier that evening, the usher guided me to a table near the kitchen doors, a spot usually reserved for late RSVPs or distant acquaintances. I sat down next to a couple from Brian's side of the family, polite strangers who offered stiff smiles and quickly turned back to their own conversation. From my chair, I could see the main table clearly, but I was far enough away that I might as well have been a hired musician waiting for a cue. I told myself it was just a mistake that someone had misread the chart. But when the speeches began and my name remained absent, I understood the message. I kept my breathing slow and even. The military had taught me long ago how to remain calm when the air around you vibrates with tension. I took in every detail of the room to steady myself. The tall floral centerpieces smelled of lilies and fresh pine, a nod to the upcoming holiday season. The carpet beneath my shoes was thick and soft, patterned with desert flowers in muted gold. Somewhere near the front, a child giggled and was quickly hushed by a parent. All of it felt distant, as if I were watching through a sheet of glass. Emily lifted her champagne flute and thanked her mother for teaching her resilience, thanked Brian's parents for welcoming her into their family, thanked her friends for years of laughter and loyalty. Her voice never wavered, her smile never slipped. Each word tightened the knot in my chest. Patricia had been gone for 5 years, but the memory of her still filled every room I entered. She would have seen through the performance in an instant. She would have known the difference between confidence and cruelty. The guests clapped again, the sound echoing off the high ceilings like a sudden storm. I nodded politely when a waiter refilled my glass, the ice cubes ringing against the crystal like tiny bells. I brought the water to my lips but barely tasted it. My right hand rested on the old phone hidden in the pocket of my jacket. Inside that phone waited a voice and a truth that could change the night and every life in the room. Only I knew what it contained. Only I knew the promise behind it. A woman at the next table leaned toward me with a sympathetic smile. "Beautiful speech," she whispered. I returned a quiet thank you, careful to keep my tone neutral. There was nothing more to say. The band began to play a soft jazz number, and the newlyweds moved toward the dance floor. Guests turned their chairs to watch their faces glowing in the warm light. I remained still, my eyes fixed on the stage where the microphone stood empty. I could still hear the last echo of Emily's voice in my head, each word a reminder of the distance that had grown between us. I thought of the long nights in the hospital when Patricia was fighting for her life, of the promise I made beside her bed, of the savings I spent without hesitation. I thought of the anonymous checks I had mailed over the years, the quiet ways I had tried to support a daughter who believed she had outgrown me. All those memories crowded the edges of my mind as I sat in that glittering hall. I tightened my grip on the phone. If you wonder why I stayed silent, let me take you back. People thought I was just a quiet retiree living off a small pension. They were half right. My name is Robert Whitaker, and I am 68 years old. Most days you would find me in a modest two-bedroom apartment in north central Phoenix, a neighborhood of low stucco buildings shaded by old palm trees, and the smell of hot desert dust. My neighbors know me as the man who waters his plants every morning at 6 and waves politely when they pass. I drive a silver 2010 Honda Civic with a small dent on the back bumper, the kind of car that blends into every grocery store parking lot. My monthly military pension arrives like clockwork, $2,500 deposited into a checking account that rarely shows more than a few thousand at a time. To anyone looking in from the outside, I am a man who worked hard, served his country, and settled into a quiet retirement. That is the picture I wanted them to see. I learned the art of quiet during my years in military cybersecurity, protecting information that could never be leaked. After retiring, I took consulting work in cyber defense, contracts that paid far more than anyone imagined but required absolute confidentiality. People heard pension and assumed I lived paycheck to paycheck. I let them believe it. Patricia understood my need for silence. We met when I was stationed at Luke Air Force Base. She was a librarian downtown who loved that I listened more than I talked. We built a life on quiet gestures and simple pleasures. Emily arrived 5 years later, bringing new music into our home. She was a sensitive child who cried when she stepped on ants and saved her allowance to donate to the animal shelter. At 8, she wrote me a Father's Day card that said, "Daddy, you're quiet, but your love is loud." At 15, after I missed another school play due to deployment, she said, "It's okay, Dad. I know you're keeping people safe." That girl seemed so far from the woman who would later erase me from her wedding speech. The consulting contracts paid extraordinarily well. We had millions, but lived in a modest house, drove old cars, clipped coupons. Patricia believed wealth should be private. That character mattered more than comfort. We saved quietly, invested carefully, always living below our means. Then came the diagnosis. Breast cancer advanced. We fought with everything we had. I sold our house, drained accounts, liquidated investments to pay for treatments Medicare wouldn't cover. The Mayo Clinic became our second home. I would have spent every cent 10 times over if it could have saved her. One evening, near the end, Patricia reached for my hand in that hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and her favorite lotion. Her voice was weak but steady. She asked me to promise 2 things. First, never enable cruelty or vanity in Emily, no matter how much it hurt to hold back. Second, keep our true financial position secret until the right moment arrived. She'd seen how sudden wealth could twist families. She worried Emily was already showing signs. The casual remarks about inheritance during visits, the focus on material things. Patricia believed Emily needed to earn her own strength to understand that character matters more than money. I sat beside her bed holding her thin hand and promised. I promised with every part of me that still believed in honor. I promised even though my heart was breaking. After years of building wealth again through new contracts, I now had more than ever. But I would keep it hidden, just as Patricia asked. Patricia passed away a few weeks later, leaving a void that silence alone could not fill. After the funeral, I returned to our apartment and opened the small safe. Inside, I placed a digital recording she had made during her final days. Her voice was soft but steady. I listened once, then sealed it away with the other documents. That recording became both a comfort and a burden. It was proof of the life we built and the warning she left behind. Years have passed since that night, and I have kept my promise. I continue to live modestly. I let neighbors believe I am a man of limited means. I drive the old Civic and decline invitations to expensive vacations. Emily thinks her father is a retired technician who saved just enough for a simple retirement. She does not know about the investments, the contracts, or the property deeds. She does not know about the voice waiting inside that phone. Before my wife Patricia passed, she asked me for one promise I was not sure I could keep. I wrote check after check, watched our savings disappear, but she asked me for something far harder than money. Patricia's illness began with a shadow on a routine scan, a small blur the doctor called suspicious. Within a month, the blur had a name and a plan of attack: breast cancer, advanced. The words settled over our lives like a heavy blanket. We moved quickly because there was no time to waste. Appointments multiplied until our calendar looked like a military operation. Biopsies, consultations, clinical trials. Each new test carried a price tag that Medicare would not touch. The Mayo Clinic in Phoenix became our second home. The halls were wide and always smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. Machines hummed behind closed doors and the soft squeak of rubber soles echoed through the long corridors. I learned the pattern of those hallways, the way a soldier memorizes terrain. Early mornings began with blood draws and quiet conversations with nurses who carried both skill and sorrow in their eyes. Nights stretched into endless vigils in waiting rooms, lit by harsh fluorescent lights. I sat in chairs that never seemed to fit, sipping coffee that tasted of burnt plastic, watching the clock tick, while Patricia slept under the care of strangers who quickly became family. We sold our old house to pay for treatments outside the reach of insurance. Signing the papers felt like cutting away a piece of our history. That little house on Elm Street held every Christmas morning, every birthday party, every quiet Sunday we had shared. I signed anyway. The buyer smiled and thanked me for a quick sale. I nodded and handed over the keys. The money moved directly into a hospital account that drained faster than any faucet. I told no one. Emily believed we had simply downsized. She was busy with her career, and I wanted to protect her from the crushing arithmetic of cancer. Patricia remained steady even as her body weakened. She joked with the nurses and asked about their families. She insisted on wearing lipstick before every appointment. When the pain came, she gripped my hand and whispered prayers that I could barely hear. I sat beside her bed and studied every line of her face, trying to memorize the shape of her smile, the tiny scar near her eyebrow, the way her eyes softened whenever Emily's name was mentioned. On good days, we walked slowly through the clinic gardens where desert flowers bloomed in defiance of the heat. On bad days, I read aloud from the old books. She loved my voice, a thin shield against the sound of machines. The bills arrived like clockwork. Each envelope carried a new demand, each figure larger than the last. I cashed out savings accounts and liquidated investments, signing transfer forms until my signature felt like a stamp. I remember sitting in the bank manager's office late one afternoon while the Arizona sun burned red across the parking lot. The manager glanced at the numbers and asked if I was sure. I said yes and slid the papers back across the desk. Money meant nothing if it bought one more day of laughter, one more night of quiet conversation. I would have signed away the world if it meant Patricia could stay. One evening near the end, we sat together in her hospital room while the monitors clicked softly in the background. The sky outside the window had turned the color of copper as the desert sun set. Patricia turned to me with a calm I still cannot explain. Her voice was weak but clear. She told me she had two requests. The first was to guard Emily's heart by never enabling cruelty or vanity, no matter how much it hurt to hold back. The second was to keep our true financial position a secret until the right time. She believed Emily needed to learn the value of character over money to build her own strength without the easy escape of wealth. Her eyes held mine as she spoke, and in that quiet room I felt the weight of a promise settle onto my shoulders. I promised her that night. I promised with the certainty of a soldier swearing an oath I promised even though I had no idea how I would keep it. Patricia smiled, squeezed my hand, and closed her eyes. I sat there long after the nurses finished their rounds, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing and the soft hum of machines. I knew that this vow would shape the rest of my life. When Patricia slipped away a few weeks later, the apartment felt impossibly silent. I returned from the funeral with a bundle of documents and a single phone that contained a final message. Alone in the living room, I opened the small safe hidden behind the bookshelf. Inside, I placed the deeds to the house we no longer owned, the bank statements that told the story of our hidden fortune, and the phone with Patricia's recording. I listened once to the message she had left. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying both love and warning. I felt every word settle deep inside me. Then I sealed the phone inside the safe and turned the key. I locked her final voice memo inside a small safe and tried to lock my heart too. Thanksgiving was when I realized the house they bragged about was not even theirs. Emily had moved to Los Angeles after college to build a career in marketing, and I watched from a distance as she climbed fast. She called less often, and when she did, our conversations felt rushed, like brief layovers in an airport. One afternoon, she mentioned a man named Brian Anderson. Her voice carried a light I had not heard in years. She said he came from a respected Arizona family with a long history of real estate and cattle investments. They met at a networking event in Santa Monica, and according to Emily, he was charming, ambitious, and born into the kind of wealth that opened doors without knocking. I listened quietly and offered my usual encouragement. Inside, I felt a small chill. Old money often hides old habits. Months passed, and the calls became more about Brian than her work. She told me about expensive dinners overlooking the Pacific, about ski trips to Colorado, about the way he introduced her to influential people who could boost her career. I congratulated her but asked questions that never seemed to land. What did he do for work now? How did his family make their money today? She gave vague answers about investments and family trusts. I recognized the language of people who live on the echo of fortunes long gone. A few weeks earlier, she had called late at night, her voice small and unsure. She asked if I thought Mom would be proud of her. I told her Patricia would always be proud no matter the distance. For a brief moment, I heard the little girl who once held my hand on school mornings. 2 months before the wedding, Emily had sent me a handwritten letter, something she hadn't done in years. Dad, I know we've grown apart. The wedding planning is overwhelming, and Brian's family has such specific expectations. Sometimes I feel like I'm losing myself in all of this. I wish Mom was here. She'd know what to do. I kept that letter in my safe next to Patricia's recording. It showed a glimpse of the daughter I remembered, confused and pressured, caught between two worlds. There was another call 3 weeks before the wedding. She was crying. Brian's parents keep making comments about you, Dad, about your job, your car. I tried to defend you, but they laughed it off. I don't know how to handle them. I told her to follow her heart, not their expectations. She went quiet, then said, "Maybe if I show them I'm one of them, they'll stop." That was when I knew she was choosing a path that would lead to tonight. When Thanksgiving arrived, Brian invited both families to his parents' home in Scottsdale. Emily insisted that I come. She said it would be a good chance to get to know everyone. I agreed, even though a quiet meal alone would have been easier. I drove the Civic up the long desert highway, the late afternoon sun painting the mountains in deep red and purple. The Anderson property sat behind a gated entrance lined with tall saguaro cacti. The driveway curved past manicured lawns toward a Spanish-style mansion with wide stone steps and a front door big enough for a cathedral. From the outside, it looked like the cover of a luxury magazine. Inside, I found something else. The foyer smelled of polished wood and expensive candles. Family portraits lined the walls, each face smiling with the ease of people who had never worried about a mortgage payment. Brian's mother greeted me with a practiced warmth that cooled the moment she took in my off-the-rack blazer and plain leather shoes. She led me to the great room where guests balanced crystal glasses of wine and talked about golf tournaments and art auctions. I felt their eyes slide over me and move on as if I were a piece of furniture. Brian shook my hand firmly, but his father barely glanced up from his drink. Dinner was served on a long mahogany table set with china that probably cost more than my car. Conversation flowed easily at first. Emily spoke about her marketing projects, and Brian described a new business venture that involved overseas properties and private investors. I listened and nodded, careful not to reveal more than polite curiosity. At one point, Brian's mother complimented Emily's dress and then turned to me with a sweet smile that carried a hidden edge. She asked if I found Phoenix living affordable on a retired technician's pension. The table grew quiet for a moment before Brian jumped in with a story about a recent trip to Europe. Laughter returned, but the question lingered like smoke. As the evening wore on, the remarks grew sharper. Someone joked about the age of my car. Another guest asked if I ever regretted not building a larger retirement fund. Each comment was wrapped in velvet, but the intent was clear. I was the modest father, the man of limited means, who should be grateful for an invitation to such a fine table. Emily laughed along with them, a quick high sound that cut deeper than any insult. I kept my face calm and my answers short. Years of military discipline served me well. I had no need to prove anything to people who measured worth by square footage and vintage wine. Between courses, I excused myself to stretch my legs and wandered into a side hallway. A series of framed newspaper clippings caught my attention. They told a quiet story of financial decline. Old articles celebrated cattle deals and land purchases from decades past, but the most recent headlines spoke of bankruptcies and court settlements. I studied the dates and realized that the Anderson fortune had collapsed years earlier. The mansion we were sitting in had been lost to a bank auction and repurchased through a charitable lease program. I knew because I was the one who had bought it during a routine investment sweep. The deed rested in the small safe back in my apartment, filed among other properties I acquired, while everyone assumed I lived paycheck to paycheck. I returned to the dining room and resumed my seat as the conversation swirled around me. They bragged about the house as if nothing had changed, describing renovation plans and future parties. I sipped my water and listened. Little did they know the deed to their proud mansion carried my name. She told friends she made it on her own. I kept the receipts in a folder labeled Mercy. After Patricia passed, I watched Emily move through life with a fierce independence that looked admirable on the surface. She spoke of promotions and networking events and the freedom of living in Los Angeles. What she did not say was how often the numbers failed to add up. I heard it in the pauses between her words and the way she changed the subject when I asked about her rent or her student loans. I knew the cost of that city. I knew the salary of a young marketing associate could not carry the lifestyle she described. I also knew pride would not let her ask for help. The first time I sent money, it was for a past due student loan. I received a notice by mistake because I had once co-signed a small consolidation during her last year of college. The letter warned of penalties and threatened to damage her credit. I went to the bank, withdrew a cashier's check, and mailed it directly to the loan office with no return address. I imagined her surprise when the account suddenly cleared. She called a week later, excited that a technical error had removed her balance. I congratulated her and said nothing. That became the pattern. Each time a new crisis surfaced, I moved quietly behind the scenes. When she ran up a credit card during a stretch of unemployment, I paid it down before the interest could crush her. When her apartment complex raised rent to nearly $3,000 a month, I sent an anonymous check to the management office marked as a third-party payment. Each envelope carried the same simple word on the outside: Mercy. Inside were cashier's checks written in tidy numbers and signed by a hand she would never trace. I kept every receipt in a locked folder in my safe, a silent record of the promises I made to Patricia and the love I could not put into words. Many nights I drove across the desert to the 24-hour post office on Central Avenue. The air smelled of creosote and warm asphalt, and the stars hung low over the Phoenix skyline. I would slip the envelope through the metal slot and listen to the faint scrape as it disappeared inside. Then I would stand for a moment in the quiet parking lot watching the red light of the mailbox glow against the dark. No one knew my name. No one saw the man who funded a life from the shadows. I would climb back into my old Civic and drive home past dark storefronts and sleeping houses, the hum of the engine the only sound in the still night. Over the years, the total grew past $240,000. I never counted it all at once. I measured the cost in small victories. A late fee avoided. A credit score protected. A phone call from Emily filled with laughter instead of worry. She told friends she had built her success without a safety net. She spoke proudly of paying her own bills and earning every promotion. I listened and encouraged her, never revealing the quiet hands that steadied the ladder beneath her climb. I kept my own life deliberately plain. The same apartment, the same old car, groceries bought on senior discount days. Neighbors assumed I was stretching a small pension to cover modest needs. I let them believe it. The discipline I had learned in military service served me well. Secrets stay safe when you give the world nothing to question. Even the bank tellers who prepared my cashier's checks thought I was helping a charity. In a way, I was. I was funding the growth of a young woman who needed to believe she stood alone. There were moments when I almost told her. Times when her voice trembled as she described the pressure of rent or the fear of missing a payment. I wanted to say that she was never truly alone, that her mother and I had planned for her even in our silence. But I remembered Patricia's last request and kept my promise. Emily needed the lesson more than she needed the money. She needed to believe she had earned her own success. My role was to provide the invisible cushion and keep the secret until the right day arrived. That day began to take shape when Emily announced her engagement to Brian Anderson. The call came late on a cool spring evening. She spoke quickly, her excitement spilling through the phone like champagne bubbles. Brian had proposed during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. His parents were thrilled and eager to host a grand wedding in Arizona. She described the venue, the guest list, the plans for a reception, filled with music and laughter. I congratulated her and listened as she outlined details that revealed more about status than love. A flash of worry tightened in my chest. I thought of Patricia's warning about vanity and cruelty. I thought of the Anderson family and the quiet secrets I had discovered in their hallway. Weeks later, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox. The wedding invitation was printed on heavy cream paper with gold embossed lettering. Tucked inside was a seating chart that listed every guest and every table. I scanned the names and found mine near the very back of the ballroom, a small square labeled Table 19 next to the kitchen doors. I traced the neat black letters with my thumb and felt a slow burn rise in my chest. Then came the wedding invitation and the seating chart. The insult was not the invitation. It was the seat next to the kitchen doors. When I arrived at the Arizona Biltmore on the day of the wedding, an usher in a crisp black jacket guided me through the glittering ballroom and stopped at a small table tucked against a service hallway. The chair faced a set of swinging doors, where waiters came and went carrying trays of champagne and plates of hors d'oeuvres. From there I could see the stage and the dance floor, but every conversation and every photograph would happen far from my corner. I thanked the usher and sat down without a word. The room glowed with a golden light that poured from chandeliers as big as satellite dishes. Strings of white roses draped along the balcony railings, and the smell of champagne and candle wax floated in the air. Guests arrived in tailored suits and sparkling gowns, their laughter rising above the music from the jazz trio near the bar. I folded my hands in my lap and let the sound wash over me. Years of military service had taught me to sit still and observe. Tonight, that discipline felt like armor. Emily entered on Brian's arm to a wave of applause. She looked radiant in an ivory gown that caught every shimmer of the lights. Cameras flashed as she moved toward the stage, her smile wide and perfect. I felt the same mix of pride and distance that had followed me since she left for Los Angeles. She took the microphone and began a speech that danced between gratitude and subtle cuts. She praised the Anderson family for showing her what real class looked like. She thanked her mother for teaching resilience and elegance. She spoke of mentors who guided her career and friends who stood by her through every challenge. My name never crossed her lips. Each omission landed with a quiet thud inside my chest. The guests around me clapped at every pause, unaware of the small war playing out behind my calm face. I lifted my water glass and watched the reflection of the chandelier tremble on the surface. My breathing stayed steady, but my heart beat a slow, heavy rhythm that matched the bass of the band. Between lines, Emily glanced toward my corner with a look that lasted less than a second. It wasn't pure coldness. I caught something else. A flicker of guilt, maybe regret, quickly masked by the bright smile she wore like armor. Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted the champagne glass. Brian whispered something in her ear, and she nodded, but her eyes darted back to me once more. In that moment, I saw the war inside her. The daughter who loved me fighting against the woman trying to belong in Brian's world. It was not anger. It was something colder. A confirmation that I belonged exactly where the seating chart had placed me. Far enough away to be forgotten, yet close enough to witness her triumph. I felt a brief flash of heat behind my eyes, but it faded quickly. Patricia's voice came back to me from that last night in the hospital. Do not enable cruelty. Hold your ground with quiet strength. I kept my posture straight and my expression calm. The waiters continued their dance through the swinging doors beside me. Every few minutes, the scent of roasted salmon and warm bread drifted out as the kitchen opened and closed. Plates clattered softly against metal counters. I could hear the faint hiss of a steam wand from the coffee station. These ordinary sounds anchored me more than the polished speeches and polite laughter. They reminded me that beyond the performance, life continued in its plain rhythm. When the band struck the opening notes of a new song, Emily lifted her glass and invited everyone to toast the future. Her words about character and success carried the polished shine of a marketing pitch. The room responded with cheers. I nodded politely when a waiter offered more water and let the noise settle around me like a heavy coat. Inside my jacket pocket, the weight of Patricia's phone pressed against my ribs. I touched the edge of the case with my fingertips, a small reassurance that the night would not end as they expected. I thought of the years of silent support, the cashier's checks labeled mercy, the promises kept in secret. I thought of Patricia's final request and the quiet strength she admired. I knew the moment was approaching when silence would no longer be enough. The truth waited inside that phone patient and unchanging. The speeches wound down and the band softened to a low background tune. Guests began to shift in their seats, ready for dinner to be served. I reached into my jacket and brought out the phone, its black screen reflecting the chandelier above me. I set it gently on the white linen tablecloth and rested my hand beside it. The cool fabric of the cloth felt steady beneath my palm. I watched the crowd laugh and chat, unaware of the storm that hovered a breath away. I set Patricia's phone on the white linen and waited for the music to stop. I rose from my chair and felt the quiet ripple through the ballroom. The scent of roses thickened as I passed each table, and the polished floor reflected the chandelier light like a river of molten gold. Every footstep sounded louder than the music that had filled the hall only moments before. The band slowed to a gentle stop, and the murmur of conversation faded until only the soft hum of the chandeliers remained. I walked toward the stage with the steady pace of a man who has nothing to prove and everything to reveal. My shoes clicked against the polished floor, each step echoing in the wide hall. When I reached the microphone, I rested my hands on the stand and let my eyes travel across the sea of faces. Some looked curious, others slightly amused, as if the quiet father had finally decided to give a polite toast. I took a slow breath and allowed a small pause to settle over the room. I was never poor. I chose quiet. I let the words hang for a heartbeat before continuing. But quiet can be louder than wealth. The silence that followed was sharp enough to hear a fork drop. I could feel every eye shift toward me, searching for meaning. My voice remained calm, and even the way it had during years of military briefings, when precision mattered more than volume. I explained that while many knew me as a retired technician living on a modest pension, there was more to the story. During my decades in military cybersecurity, I managed contracts that required absolute confidentiality. Those contracts were not only successful, they were extraordinarily lucrative. Over time, careful investments turned a good living into something far larger. I reached into my jacket and unfolded a sheet of paper, holding it lightly between my fingers. I took another slow breath and let my eyes drift across the chandeliers. Memories of the nights Patricia and I counted pennies for rent flickered in my mind, steadying me before I spoke the numbers that would change the room. My personal checking account holds $35 million. A soft gasp moved across the room like a breeze through dry grass. I waited until it faded before speaking again. Years of disciplined work and quiet investing built a fortune that most people in this room would never suspect. The Anderson family shifted in their seats. Brian's mother lowered her eyes. I continued with the same measured tone. I paused to let the rustle of whispers die down, allowing each revelation to find its place in the hearts of those listening. During my final years of service, I oversaw a cyber defense contract valued at $45 million. That project, along with other investments, provided the foundation for the life I now live. I chose not to display it. I chose to drive an old Civic and water plants on a small balcony because character should never depend on a bank balance. My voice carried easily through the hall, each sentence deliberate and clear. Then I revealed the part that tightened every jaw in the Anderson family. The mansion where we were gathered tonight, the proud symbol of old money and social standing, no longer belonged to the Andersons. Years ago, it was lost in a bank auction after a series of failed investments. During a quiet sweep of distressed properties, I purchased it through a charitable trust. The deed rests in a safe in my apartment, and the Anderson family has occupied this house under a lease of $1 per year, a lease I chose to honor so they could maintain appearances. I let the information settle into the silence. I scanned the faces before me. Some guests looked stunned, others uncomfortable, a few openly impressed. Emily sat frozen near the head table, her champagne flute untouched, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and disbelief. I kept my gaze steady on her and offered a small nod, not of triumph, but of recognition. The truth had been hidden long enough. I told the guests that wealth is not a measure of worth. I reminded them that quiet choices build stronger foundations than public displays. I said that a man who keeps his word is richer than any bank account. My voice remained calm, never rising above the natural rhythm of conversation, but each sentence carried the weight of years of silence. The ballroom remained still, except for the soft clink of a glass somewhere near the back. I allowed another pause, giving the truth time to breathe. My eyes returned to Emily. I thought of the nights I had slipped checks into envelopes marked "Mercy," of the promises whispered beside Patricia's hospital bed. Tonight was not about humiliation. It was about keeping a vow. Numbers can be loud, but a mother's voice is louder. I reached into my pocket and rested my hand on Patricia's phone, the small device that held her final message. The room held its breath as I prepared to share the one sound that would cut deeper than any figure or deed. "Patricia, if this is the wrong way, stop me now." My voice carried across the silent ballroom as I held the phone in my hand. The chandelier lights reflected off the black screen like tiny stars. I pressed play. A soft crackle filled the speakers, and then her voice, gentle and unmistakable, flowed into the room. "Hello, my love. If you are hearing this, then I am gone. Please remember the promise we made." Her words were faint but steady, each syllable wrapped in the calm certainty that had always defined her. She spoke of love, first telling me how grateful she was for our years together, for the quiet mornings and the laughter that filled our small kitchen. Then her tone shifted, still tender but firm. She asked me to protect Emily's heart, even when she could not. She reminded me that character matters more than comfort, that love without discipline becomes weakness. The room remained frozen. No one moved. Forks lay untouched. Glasses of champagne stood still, bubbles rising in slow motion. Patricia's breathing could be heard between sentences, a soft rasp that brought the hospital room back to me in a single instant. I felt the weight of those long nights, the smell of disinfectant, and the steady beep of monitors, the way she had gripped my hand when she recorded these very words. Patricia continued. She spoke of the day Emily visited during her final week. She described how Emily arrived late and spent most of the visit on her phone. She told of careless remarks, words about inheritance and lifestyle that cut deeper than any diagnosis. Patricia did not repeat the insults word for word, but the meaning was clear. Emily had wondered aloud how long the treatments would continue, how much money would be left when it was over. Patricia's voice did not carry anger. It carried a quiet sorrow, the sound of a mother who loved her child, but saw the danger of pride growing in her heart. I looked toward Emily. She sat rigid in her chair, her eyes fixed on the floor, her hands clasped so tightly the knuckles turned white. Guests shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. Patricia's voice filled every corner of the hall. "Robert, you must promise me," she said, "to never let our daughter believe that wealth defines worth. Do not give her easy access to what we have saved. Let her learn strength through effort and humility. Hold the truth until the moment comes when she needs to hear it. Only then will she understand the value of character over money." The recording captured a faint cough, followed by a small laugh, the laugh she used when she wanted to soften a hard truth. I imagined her lying in that hospital bed, pale, but still beautiful, determined to guide our family, even as her own time ran out. She spoke of gratitude for the nurses, of the kindness of strangers who prayed for her recovery. She thanked me for loving her without condition. She ended with a blessing for Emily, a prayer that our daughter would one day find wisdom and compassion greater than ambition. Her first sentence froze the room, and the final words left it in complete stillness. I let the recording play until the soft click of the phone signaled the end. No one moved. The only sound was the faint buzz of the chandelier lights and the quiet hum of the air conditioning. I lowered the phone and let my eyes rest on Emily. I wanted her to see not anger, but the love and resolve that Patricia had entrusted to me. The truth had been spoken in a voice stronger than any numbers I could reveal, a mother's voice that still guided us all. This isn't revenge. This is the promise I made to her mother. My voice carried across the ballroom with a steady weight that needed no force. I held the microphone loosely, letting the quiet settle before I spoke again. Patricia's message had left the room frozen, and now every face turned toward me, waiting for what would follow. I reached into my jacket pocket and drew out a single folded document, the updated will, that held the final piece of the truth. I explained that this will was notarized earlier that week and witnessed according to Arizona law. It contained my final instructions for the fortune everyone had just learned existed. My words were simple and deliberate. My daughter Emily will receive $1. The rest of my estate, currently valued at more than $74 million, will be donated to the Arizona Cancer Center in honor of Patricia Whitaker. The words landed like stones dropped into a still pond. Gasps broke the silence, followed by a low rustle of whispers that moved across the room like wind across dry grass. I paused to let the shock settle. My eyes traveled over the guests, from distant relatives to old friends to members of the Anderson family, who now sat stiff and pale. I explained that this decision was not an act of punishment, but an act of love. Patricia and I built our life on quiet discipline and on values that money cannot buy. Our greatest hope was that Emily would grow into a woman who valued character over comfort, integrity over appearance. Patricia believed that true growth could not come from inherited wealth. Tonight, I fulfilled the promise I made beside her hospital bed. I described how the Arizona Cancer Center had cared for Patricia with compassion and skill, how their research offered hope to families facing the same battle we endured. I told the guests that every dollar of my estate would help fund treatments, research, and patient support, so that others might find more time than Patricia was given. I said that wealth is only meaningful when it serves a purpose greater than pride. The room remained silent except for the soft hum of the chandeliers. I could see Emily staring at the floor, her shoulders tight, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. Brian shifted uncomfortably beside her, his hand hovering near hers, but never quite touching. Across the room, a few guests nodded slowly, their expressions softening as the meaning of the gift settled in. I continued with calm clarity. Emily is not being cast aside. She is being invited to build her own life, to stand on her own achievements, and to discover a strength that money can never provide. I reminded her and everyone listening that Patricia loved her deeply, and that this decision came from that love, not from anger. I wanted Emily to hear the message beneath the numbers. This was a chance for her to prove to herself that she was more than any inheritance. The whispers grew louder. A man near the back began to clap softly. Another guest joined him. The applause spread slowly at first, then gathered strength until a wave of sound rolled through the hall. It came not from family, but from strangers, people who understood the courage behind the choice. Their hands echoed off the high ceilings like a quiet anthem of respect. I stood still and let the sound wash over me. At the head table, the Anderson family remained frozen. Brian's father stared at the floor, his jaw clenched tight. His mother held her wine glass, but did not drink. Emily stayed silent, her eyes still fixed on the polished wood of the table. I noticed her hands shaking as she reached for Brian's arm, but he pulled away, his face red with humiliation. His mother leaned over and hissed something sharp. Emily flinched. For the first time all night, she looked truly alone at that glittering head table, abandoned by the very people she'd tried so hard to impress. The crowd that had cheered her speech now whispered about her. I saw her shoulders begin to shake, not with anger, but with the weight of understanding. The applause continued around them, filling the room with a warmth that had nothing to do with money. The strangers honored a promise, kept a love that refused to be measured by wealth. When the clapping finally slowed, I spoke once more. Patricia believed that character is the only true inheritance. Tonight, I give Emily the gift of discovering her own. I thank the guests for witnessing the fulfillment of a vow and for supporting the fight against the disease that had taken Patricia from us. I reminded them that generosity is the highest form of wealth, and that silence can hold more power than any display of riches. The applause came from strangers. The silence came from family. I lowered the microphone and stepped back from the stage. The decision was final. The promise was kept. I stepped away from the microphone and felt the weight of the room lift from my shoulders. The applause faded behind me as I walked through the wide doors of the ballroom and out into the cool Arizona night. The air smelled of desert sage and faint candle smoke from the reception. The parking lot was quiet except for the hum of a distant generator and the crunch of gravel under my shoes. I drew a slow breath and looked up at the sky where a wash of stars stretched across the darkness like a field of salt on black velvet. For the first time in years, I felt the stillness of a promise, finally kept. I reached my car and rested a hand on the roof, letting the metal coolness steady me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen glowed with a name that tightened my chest. Emily. I answered and held the phone to my ear. Her voice came through low and trembling. Dad, we need to talk. I waited, giving her space to speak. She hesitated, then words spilled out in a rush. Why did you do that? Why humiliate me in front of everyone? Do you hate me? Each question carried a weight of confusion and hurt. I listened without interruption until the flood slowed. Then I spoke quietly. This isn't about hate. It isn't revenge. It is the promise I made to your mother. She wanted you to grow strong without leaning on money. She wanted you to know that character will always matter more than wealth. The line went silent except for the faint sound of her breathing. I could picture her standing somewhere inside the mansion phone, pressed to her ear, struggling to hold back tears. After a long pause, she whispered, I don't understand. I thought if I became successful, if I married well, you'd finally be proud of me. Brian's family made me feel so small, Dad. They made you feel small. I wanted to show them we weren't. I wanted to matter. Her voice cracked. When Mom was sick, I was scared. I said terrible things because I didn't know how to handle losing her. I was 23 and selfish and frightened. I asked about money because I didn't know how to ask if you'd be okay after she was gone. I listened to her breathe, ragged and real. Emily, I said softly, I've always been proud of you. But pride built on others' approval is a house built on sand. Your mother knew that. This isn't punishment. It's my last gift to you. The chance to discover who you really are when the Anderson family's approval no longer matters. She was quiet for a long moment. Brian already left me, she whispered. The moment you finished speaking, he walked out. His mother called me a fraud, said I trapped him with lies about my background. A bitter laugh escaped her. Funny how quickly love disappears when the money does. That wasn't love, Emily. That was a transaction. I know that now. Her voice was small. Dad, I need time to think, to understand. Maybe to forgive, Ma. Both you and myself. Take all the time you need. There was another long silence, then a quiet goodbye before the line went dead. I stood beside the Civic for a moment longer, the phone still warm in my hand. The desert wind carried the faint scent of mesquite and distant rain. I looked up at the stars again and felt a calm that reached deeper than satisfaction. It was the calm of a vow fulfilled. The next morning, I drove to Mel's Diner, the small place Patricia and I had visited on quiet weekends, long before illness changed our lives. The sun was just rising over the mountains, spilling copper light across the parking lot. Inside the diner, the air smelled of coffee and fresh biscuits. I slid into a corner booth and ordered a black coffee the way Patricia always liked it. The waitress poured it steaming into a heavy white mug. I wrapped my hands around the cup and let the warmth seep into my fingers. Through the wide front window, I watched the desert wake. The sky shifted from deep violet to pale gold. A freight train sounded its horn somewhere beyond the ridge. A young couple laughed softly at the counter, while an older man read the morning paper. Life moved on in its quiet rhythm, untouched by the storm of the previous night. I sipped the bitter coffee and thought of Patricia's smile, of the promise I had carried like a hidden compass through every decision. I felt no triumph, only peace. I whispered a small prayer of thanks for the years we had shared and for the strength to keep my word. The world outside the window glowed with the soft light of a new day. If you carry a promise in your heart, let this be your reminder that keeping it is the greatest inheritance you can give. Some lessons are worth every penny, and some promises are worth a lifetime. If this story reminds you of a promise in your own family, share it. The sharing keeps the lesson alive and gives meaning to every quiet choice we make. 6 months later, a letter arrived. Emily's handwriting steadier now. Dad, Brian's divorce papers came last week. His lawyer made sure I got nothing. Not that there was much to get from a family living on borrowed prestige. I'm back in a studio apartment, the kind I could actually afford. I started volunteering at the Arizona Cancer Center. Met Sarah, Mom's old nurse. She remembered you both told me about the nights you never left Mom's side, how you'd read to her until your voice went hoarse. Sarah said Mom talked about me, constantly worried about me, loved me, even when I disappointed her. I found one of those mercy envelopes in my old files. Recognized your handwriting finally? You always did that weird loop on your eyes. Sitting on my floor, surrounded by $240,000 worth of receipts I found in a storage unit you forgot to mention, I cried until I couldn't breathe. I'm not ready to forgive everything, but I'm beginning to understand. Mom was right. I was becoming someone neither of us would recognize. The wedding speech? God, Dad, I'm so ashamed. The center is hosting a gala next month. They want to honor you for the donation. I know you'll decline, but I'll be there. Maybe we could get coffee at Mel's afterward? I remember you and Mom used to go there. Still your daughter, the one you raised, not the one who forgot, Emily. P.S. I kept the dollar, framed it. It's worth more than Brian's family ever was.